Eric, I want to start with this one post. You had a banger of a tweet in 2022 that went absolutely viral. You talked about the greatest wealth transfer in the world in history has begun. You said an estimated $70 trillion. It's not crypto, it's not the memes, it's not the stock market or real estate. It's actually the transfer of small and medium-sized businesses from baby boomers to millennials, right? So I read that piece. I was excited. I'm like, all right, let me go and find a laundromat here in Orlando. Then I was listening to your podcast recently in Main Street Deals, and you talked about how in 2025 there were issues with tariffs, there were issues with the loans due to the government shutdowns. Today, at this point in time, 2026, what are some nuances that people overlook when they get started in buying a business?
Yeah, well, first of all, Gabriel, thank you for having me on the program. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to talk about lower middle market M&A is sort of how I characterize it. You know, anything we at SMB Law Group, we really specialize. I guess I can't say specialize, but we really focus on sub 50 million A. That's really considered by many to be the American lower middle market. Any business south of $50 million in asset value that really sometimes in certain people's categories stops at 2 million in EV enterprise value. And then you sort of have a Main Street category beneath it. We started a firm about 4 years ago called SMB Law Group, and that firm has since 2022 done about $1.6 billion in American lower middle market. So probably statistically makes us one of the top deal firms in the country by volume in the lower middle market. But, you know, the driver for that has been we have a unique economic situation happening in not just here, but generationally, where you've got, you know, I think you said the number was 70 trillion, different estimates, depending on who you ask and how you sort of categorize it. But there is an enormous amount of American wealth that is going to be transferred from the baby boomer generation to the Gen X and the millennial generations, their children. The vast majority of that is comprised of real estate, stock, and a variety of assets, including American small businesses. And the point you were getting at is that the American small business comprises probably $7 to $10 trillion worth of value. I mean, you're somebody who's built a business. Gabriel, you're 70 years old, flash in the future, you built a great business, but you're 70, right? And you know, running a business is challenging. You mentioned the things that happened last year. We could talk about that as well. Running a small business is very labor intensive. It requires a lot of attention. It's not real estate. You buy real estate, it's, you know, a box and some dirt, not to minimize that, but comparatively, it's very simple, right? Borderline, maybe passive. Running a lower middle market business is rarely passive in any capacity, right? So you get old, you want to sell the business to somebody. You don't just want to shut it down. You want to get value for that. You look to your children, but, you know, Gabriel, you've been successful for the last 3 decades. You're 70, you know, because you were successful and your business was making 500, a million, 1.5 million in earnings. Your kids have gone to great schools. They've, you know, gone off to college, and now they're doctors and dentists and attorneys and accountants. And, you know, coming home to run Gabriel's HVAC business isn't attractive to them, particularly after their childhood, seeing how difficult it is to run a business and what it's like having ups and downs and firing people and layoffs and, you know, the realities of entrepreneurship. You know, they don't want to do it. Right. So what are your options? Your options for Gabriel's HVAC is to either shut it down, close the door, or to sell it, right? So you take it to the market, you find a local broker, somebody puts a listing online, and out comes, you know, a whole generation of young people who want to participate in that through entrepreneurship, through acquisition, buying a cash flowing business. So you find somebody that you think can do it, that offers you the right price based on a multiple of your earnings. If your business is cash flowing, you know, somewhere between $750 to $1.5 million in earnings, you're probably selling it for $3 to $5, maybe $6 million, depending on what it is, which is, you know, a nice little paycheck. You know, it's, you know, 2 to 5 times your earnings. So a couple years worth of earnings, and then you retire and you head on your way, and you hope that the buyer, because you're a good person, you know, you don't want to see your employees in the community and all that sort of lose Gabriel's HVAC. So you hope they can run it. But if they can't, you know, not really your problem unless there's contingent compensation there. in place. So that's sort of the landscape, right? That's what I was getting at 3 years ago. This entrepreneurship through acquisition movement exploded in the early 2020s, driven by COVID and sort of lifestyle and cultural changes. In 2017, there was a good book written by the Harvard Business Review called The HBR Guide to Buying a Small Business. And that sort of spearheaded this concept of entrepreneurship through acquisition, which started in elite universities and then sort of permeated down from what is characterized as traditional search for the elite MBAs into what we now call self-funded search for everybody else, right? And everybody else that's buying businesses, it's just a central tenet of American economics is the buying and selling of these small businesses for the reasons that I just described. And so, that really took off in the early 20s and now has gotten very hot and some would argue oversaturated. But I think the reality is that there's still a tremendous amount of assets that need to be sold. Somebody has to buy them. And SBA debt, Small Business Administration debt, is sort of the key driver in that area, sort of provides the liquidity for the space. And that sort of tethers what's possible, right? Keeps valuations between, 2 and 5. So these businesses can't get too expensive to be bought, but obviously there can be many, many buyers for every good business, and some businesses are better than others. So that's sort of the 101 of the entrepreneurship through acquisition movement. If you'd like, I could talk to you about sort of the realities of what we've seen across $1.6 billion in acquisitions and the difficulty of entrepreneurship, not just ETA as it's described.
No, I would definitely want to tap into that. You also mentioned like the piece of oversaturation, which I agree. I feel like sometimes there's things that start trending and everyone wants to do it and think like it's like the foolproof scapegoat to just make a lot of money quickly. So I guess from like your experience, I kind of want to tap into some of those things of like the entrepreneurship piece of it that's hard as shit to actually like implement. Some niches right now that have maybe more potential than others, and kind of like pick your brain on that.
The internet generally, it's no surprise to anybody that there's a desire to simplify, to oversimplify. And there's a lot of demand. There'll always be a lot of demand for shortcuts, right? For finding an easy way, for finding a way to get rich quick, to put it simply, right? So there are certainly people who have utilized what's happening in entrepreneurship through acquisition and sort of small business M&A to make a quick buck and to sort of exploit what's happening out there. Because the reality of it is it's very, very difficult, right? Running a business is very difficult. Not all businesses are created equally, right? Some businesses are great with diversified customer bases, right? Lots of customers. You lose one, no big deal. You got 99 more. Some businesses don't have that. Some businesses have a handful of customers. And if you lose one, it's enormously problematic. Some businesses are not heavily dependent on the seller, right? The seller's done a good job of phasing themselves out over the years as a team that's competent, has management that's competent. You can step in, run that business seamlessly or sort of seamlessly. Other businesses are heavily dependent on the seller. They're glorified jobs. They're relationship-based businesses that the seller runs. Some businesses have clients that are recurring, right? They pay you every month in and out. So when you're looking out over 2026 and you say, how much are we going to make this year? What can we afford to spend on employees and the like? It's very easy to forecast. Other businesses don't have that. Other businesses are project-based. You get clients one time, you never see them again, right? I could have a massive first quarter and then in Q2, I could have nobody. You don't know, right? So, when you think about businesses, not all businesses are created equally, right? And when you get into a business and what you find as an owner operator, right, is the buck stops with you. If you've got a delivery that needs to be made on Friday for a wedding for, your business and your person gets sick, guess who's getting in the car to drive it the 3 hours to deliver the product to the client so that you don't ruin their big day and ruin your reputation in the process, right? So underestimating the challenge that happens post-closing. Business is really, really tough. And if you've got a successful business, in many cases, people will seek to copy that. They'll seek to emulate you. In the sort of the world that I'm in, I have lots of people who take you mentioned, some of the posts that I have and some of the content that's gotten traction. People take my words, Gabriel, verbatim, and they use them to build their brand. And they take our brand and they see the way we've differentiated ourselves and they create websites that look exactly like our website and say the same things we do, right? And that's business, right? And that's frustrating. and you can be frustrated by that, but it's not going to change the reality of the world, which is there's very few original ideas, and it's everybody's trying to, get theirs. So, you've got the conflux of the reality of, life in the world and people's desire to get rich and to be greedy and to get theirs with, sort of the realities of business. And it's not very sexy to say, hey, entrepreneurship has risk. I do lots of social posts and other different sort of writings about challenges and about risk. And those aren't always super well received. Those aren't always the ones that go viral. The ones that seem to get the traction are the ones that get the most traction are the ones that you've got one contingent going, hey, that's awesome because I can get rich quick. And you got another contingent going, hey, Gabriel, you're full of shit. That's you don't know what you're talking about. And those things get a lot of engagement because you got a lot of people talking, right? So it's just, you got to, understand sort of the world we're operating in.
So you talk about this bucket. I wrote down some of the things, right? There's no shortcuts. You also have like posts where you talk about like sales, where you have to be good at selling. If not, you're going to get absolutely cooked. Everything relies on you, people stealing your ideas, etc. For yourself, like doing the research, you worked at a really big law firm. What made you make that jump? How were you so certain that you were going to get clients in a relatively quick time frame?
Because we already had them, right? We had, in business, there's a concept of product market fit, and, you've got a product and then there's a market, and do those two things mesh, right? There's a famous clip of Steve Jobs at a shareholder meeting. It's a great clip. And somebody effectively takes the mic and says, hey, Steve, like, I want to know directly from you what you're doing to keep up with this competitor product that is killing your product, right? They have tech that you don't have. They have, features that you don't have. They're kicking your butt, right? And Steve, knowing that he's challenged, kind of gets frustrated, takes his water bottle, takes a drink, and he sort of hems and haws. He's sitting on a stool and he's like, the problem with what you're telling me is that you're right. It is a better product. Has features we don't have. But the bigger problem is that when you're designing a product, you have to be able to sell that product, right? I can make the best, I could be the best attorney in the world, right? I could be the best M&A lawyer on the planet. And I could go absolutely insane every time I get a client and spend every waking hour for 3 months making sure that every last stone has been turned over. And that would cost the client $300,000 probably in billable time, $1 million in billable time. Well, guess what? There's no market for that. Nobody wants to pay $300,000 to paper up their lower middle market transaction. So when we started the firm, we already had clients, right? I had started talking about lower middle market M&A publicly and about entrepreneurship through acquisition. Had a lot of people coming to me saying, hey, Eric, I want to hire you, or can you refer me to a good lawyer who can help on my 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, $15 million deal. And what I quickly realized is like, holy shit, Gabriel, I was working at Kirkland & Ellis billing at $1,500 an hour. So I couldn't do it. Right. So I turned around to try to refer them to other lawyers, and those other lawyers didn't want the work. They didn't want the work. They were too busy, or they'd take the work. And, they're really trying to take the $50 million deal, the $100 million deal that's coming in the door behind them. So when those deals do, they're not calling them back. They're not moving quickly. It's a terrible fit for them. Right. So we realized pretty quickly, like, there's demand here. So why don't we build a product that they actually want? Why don't we go talk to them? Right. I had a big social presence, and I just went out and said to, my thousands of followers across social media, what do you want? What do you want from a lawyer? How do you want us to price? How do you want us to behave? What do you want us to do? And they said, do these things. And we took those things and we built SMB Law Group, and we turned around and we gave them those things, and they hired us in huge numbers right away. And so when you're building a business, like, product market fit is the difference between pushing a boulder uphill of, hey, Steve Jobs, I've got this amazing product that has all these great features that nobody wants. Please buy it. I'm going to push it up the hill. Or I've built you, Mr. Customer. You tell me exactly what you want. Here it is. And then you're pushing you're guiding that boulder downhill. Right. So that's sort of our backstory and how things sort of started out for us.
And to that point, you talked about like a kind of a difference that I was reading through the research was rather than charging them on an hourly, you would do a flat fee, right? That's like one advantage you have. For people like that are watching this, when does it make sense to hire someone like you in acquiring a business, let's say a laundromat or a landscaping company? When does it always make sense, or is there like a certain level that you need to hit to then get?
Well, different acquisitions have different needs, right? So we have a product for Main Street transactions, sub $1.5 million enterprise value that needs a lower scope, right? I sort of think of those deals and I go, hey, you screw it up, it's going to suck, right? You screw up a $800,000 bait and tackle shop because it's been your dream. That's going to suck, right? But you'll dig out, right? You'll figure it out. You screw up a $5 million deal, Gabriel, and you've got that debt personally guaranteed. That's going to take you decades to get out of. It's going to be a disaster. You need more protection on that bigger deal than you do on a smaller deal. And then you've got much larger transactions that have very complex risk sets, that have specialty areas that need even further looks. In some instances, those get a lot larger. They might not even be the right fit for us, right? So in terms of when somebody would hire and what they would look for, anytime you're going to go under letter of intent to buy a business, you should come talk to a competent M&A attorney. And then in terms of what you need, you'll sort of want to scope that out based off of the magnitude of the risk. You know, if it's a big risk, you're taking a life-changing swing, you're buying a $5 million local business or a $10 million local business, you're going to want somebody to go all in with a team that knows what they're doing, right? You're buying a $500,000 thing, then you can sort of maybe do a templatized, more commoditized product type thing.
And when you say, for the example you said about the 800K bait shop, right? Like someone screwing up, what is like some things people can screw up? Like, I guess like high level, some popular ones that time and time again, people just get, lost in the sauce or whatever the case may be.
Well, there's something called the J curve, right? And it's literally for your audience's benefit, picture the letter J, right? You buy the business, you're at the tip of the J. There's going to be a downward slope. There's going to be that curve at the bottom, right? That is you buying a business and immediately realizing, I don't know as much as I think I do. This is hard. Some of the sales and some of the magic was actually the seller, believe it or not. And so this business, while I figure it out, is in a decline. And then you figure it out, right? Because you're smart, you're industrious, you're hardworking. You wouldn't get to the finish line of a business acquisition probably if you weren't. And you sort of recover and the business should then take off in J curve. In a perfect world, that's probably your best scenario. But, in terms of what go wrong, when you buy a business, you immediately have all of the stakeholders looking at you very, very closely, right? Number one is your employees. You buy that business and you say, you do your big speech, Gabriel, you bought your business, you're stoked, it's like, hell, hey, everybody, I'm Gabriel. It's my dream to acquire a business and I can't wait. I bought this business because I like you guys and you've built such a great business. We're going to do great things together. Literally all they're looking at when you're talking is they're going, what is in this for me? Who is this guy? Can he run this business? Do I need to go polish off my resume? Do I need to start looking for other jobs? Is Gabriel going to run this thing into the ground? Because if he is, I better get out there and start finding another job now. Is he going to fire me? Right? Like, is there redundancies? Does he have another company that has the same person in it? And it's, and now all of a sudden I'm not needed. So they're just literally sitting there listening to you and waiting to hear what is in it for them. But more than just your words, they're going to be watching you for a period of time. Is this guy confident? Does this guy communicate well? Does this guy have an education to support this? Does he have experience to support this? And if not, you're going to have some nervous Nellies on your team and you're going to lose some people. One of my favorite buyers of all time, a very confident guy who also happens to live here in Orlando with us and had bought many, many businesses and ultimately exited and was very successful, said when he acquired one of his first businesses, he got up there, gave his speech, and one of the employees walked up to him and said, "Congratulations, Mike, on buying the business, but I will never work for you," and walked off. Right? So that's probably worst case scenario. But what's going to happen for most people is something in between. You're going to have a lot of nervous people on your team and you got to give them confidence. That's stakeholder number one. Stakeholder number two is some mashup of your customers, right? If you're an accountant and you've worked with a particular accountant for a number of years and they just sold their book, fuck, man. Does Gabriel know how to do taxes? Does he know the same tax loopholes as the prior guy did? Do I like him? Do I want to see this dude every year at tax time? Does he have a punchable face? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
do I want to deal with this? Does he know what he's doing? Right. Especially when you get into things that are sort of specialty, right? If you're power washing, I don't give a shit who's power washing out there. I don't know. I hired you to power wash my house. Like, I'm not going out there and shaking the hands of the crew. I call the number, I pay the money, and then I go look and see if it's power wash. That's all I care about. But if I hire, a dentist to clean my teeth, or, something that's relationship based, an attorney, right? I want to know who that person is. Suppliers. Suppliers are giving you product, and then they're hoping you pay them. And normally those payment terms in a lot of industries are 30 days or 45 days. Well, they're giving you product and they're hoping that you pay them in 30 or 45 days. They're asking themselves right away, like, can this guy do it? Is he going to pay me? You miss one payment. The person who's been supplying you critical goods for your business may no longer want to supply you, right? Another stakeholder, believe it or not, is your competitors, right? They see the business and they go, wow, Gabriel just bought this business. Who is this guy? This is construction. Does this guy know anything about construction? This is gritty. This is tough. Landscaping. They're running all over town. They're going, hey, this dude, he bought that business, man. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to run into the ground. You should come work with me. They're coming after your employees. They're coming after your customers. There's vultures circling, right? And then you got the community as well. This person, the seller, who's a big stakeholder. Oftentimes they've got a seller carrier, some sort of seller debt in the business. That person is asking themselves, can Gabriel run this business? I care about the employees. He owes me in the seller note, a couple $100,000, $1 million, whatever. Is he going to be able to pay that back? Like, is he running this business in the ground, be able to pay me back? And so you buy that business, man, and you better be confident. You better be able to communicate. You better be tough. You better be somebody who can stand up in front of people and talk. And the room's going to vary. You asked me earlier, are there certain niches that are better than other niches? The right niche for you is the niche that is right for you, right? I run a law firm, okay? I could probably go buy an accounting firm. I could probably buy something in insurance. I could probably do, a variety of white collar related things. Brother, you put me into a construction business or you walk me into a foundry. There's a great picture of one of my good friends who had just bought a foundry, and they had a number of foundries up to this point, and they bought a fourth or a fifth. I can't remember. We helped them with the legal, and they go to talk to these guys, and the picture of him standing in this room of this very dirty facility with a nothing level kitchen, chairs, and with all these deeply blue collar men in white t-shirts with boots that are, a lot of them overweight. Like, you can picture what I'm picturing, right? Yep. Just looking at this dude as he's talking. I couldn't go into that room and stand in front of those dudes and say, hello, my name's Eric Pacifici, the longtime M&A attorney with glasses that doesn't know what a foundry is, and have them take me seriously, right? So what niche is right for you, or what niche is going to be the best, depends entirely on who you are as a person, and how you will screw it up is by not being able to walk into that right situation and be in.
Those are all some really good points, especially about the stakeholders piece. I think a lot of times people just really think it's going to be, if I buy a landscaping company, it's just going to, kick off. But this is very much Game of Thrones in real life. Now, to that piece, I also want to add something else, right? Like, people are also going to maybe hear that and be like, oh, bro, but I could use AI for all these things to kind of like troubleshoot these questions and go through that. And there was that post you had retweeted about, I think it was like Ben Affleck on Joe Rogan, talking about how AI is not really there yet for most people. Like, it's not going to really change your life. From that standpoint, do you think people are relying too much on AI when it comes to these businesses, whether it's decision making or whatever the case may be?
Well, first of all, I'm glad somebody's actually reading my posts. So that's
I got
awesome.
you, dude. I read all of them.
I appreciate that, man. That's all. You and my mom. That's awesome. I think what Ben Affleck was saying in that clip, and I think the clip was actually dated, but is that these large language models, these LLM, like ChatGPT and Claude and others, are great tools. right? But are they going to full cloth replace professionals? And the answer is maybe, but not yet, right? Like you take an M&A transaction, there's at least 120 things that like have to happen in a simple deal. Like that's not, there's no tool yet that is going to be able to do all of that without human judgment, right? Will that day come? Maybe. But I think it's a lot further along than people think. I think these LLMs require a lot more electricity and data than people are taking into consideration. I think where they are today are like really sophisticated writing and thought partners, but not something that's going to replace a human fully yet. Depends on the industry, obviously, and what you're doing. But in terms of utilizing them to buy a business, like I use AI all the time for a variety of functions in our firm. It's fantastic. It's a great thought partner. I literally was up at 3 a.m. this morning working on things and was sort of, running through scenarios with a few LLMs about different things in our business and sort of thinking, So I'm a believer, to be clear, but just not in a replacement capacity. And if you think you're going to take AI into these small businesses, Main Street businesses, like don't underestimate how much the younger generation is living in a digital reality, particularly if you're in, getting a lot of your information from a siloed social media like Facebook or X, or a lot of people are heavy Instagram readers. The people in the real world are not there. They're not. You take AI into, Bob's HVAC business, plumbing and HVAC, and tell Cheryl in accounting, who's been doing the same thing for 20 years, that, hey, now you're going to use this AI-based bookkeeping software. She'll probably quit, bro. Yeah, she'll probably say, I'm not doing this shit. Gabriel doesn't know what he's doing. And so these businesses, it's a human thing, right? Like you're managing people, and you can either manage people or you can't. You can have all the tools in the world, but 65-year-old Daryl, the HVAC technician, or, Gary, the landscaper, who's, not taking you seriously. And so he goes out, hey, I'm going to go do my route. And then you find him sleeping under a tree in his mower where he thinks nobody can see him. How are you going to handle that? We had a client, it's a true story. We worked on an acquisition. I invested. The 2 weeks after closing, one of the crew members went number 2 in the yard of one of the clients. The client has picture and video of the person doing it. The buyer calls the person who did it, the crew member, and says, we need to talk. The crew member says, wasn't me, man. He says, dude, we got picture and video. So I don't care what you got. Wasn't me. You need this guy. You run a small business. There's only so many people that do what he does in the area. Labor's not exactly abundant. You don't want to upset morale by firing somebody 2 weeks in. What do? Right? These are the type of things that you need to be prepared for. And it's, I don't know that ChatGPT is going to be able to walk you through that situation if you're not a competent person that can handle relationships.
I would say those are all valid points. One of the things I would add for AI as well, like in my own life, I definitely use it a good amount. But one of the issues I feel like I see consistently is like, if you're running through a certain situation or asking it a question, you could kind of like always get it to agree with you in some way, shape, or form. Like if it gives you answer A, you could be like, no, I really don't think it's answer A, it's this. And then it just like completely changes its whole like logic and thought process to just align to like what you kind of want. So that's kind of like, for my sense, some of the like the issues I see. With AI though, like you and yourself, with small and medium-sized businesses, what's kind of like your general take? Do you feel like they're kind of going to consolidate, given that maybe AI can do the job of a Daryl or Cheryl, Gary, or like et cetera? Like, is it going to start consolidating or no?
I don't know. I don't have any data to support like what's happening in private equity roll-ups and sort of the world. We live in we represent a lot of private equity funds that are acquiring businesses. They have success to varying degrees with that, and that has sort of changed over time. And, there's a lot of pushback against them, right? Against the consolidation of these Main Street businesses. And for good reason. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but sometimes if I'm going to hire somebody locally and I've got 3 bidders, and if I call and one of them is clearly, the goal of every good business is to systemize and to, build something that's scalable. Sometimes it's taken too far and the human element is gone. we have a septic system where I live in Central Florida here. There's no city water. We live in a city with septic. Well, we bought this house, and the septic company who did the septic tank got sold to a larger private equity backed roll up. They no longer have any of the data or record from the prior septic work. So we're trying to figure out what's going on. And I got the woman at the company saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry. When it was these guys, everything was great. Now it's these guys, and we don't know what's going on. We don't have any of the records, and I'm really sorry." That ain't a good look, dude. That's not a good look, right? And they're not calling us back because they got different divisions, and this person is the plumbing division. This person's the septic division. So they're going to call you to do an assessment, but they haven't called. So you keep calling, you keep getting this person. It's a disaster. Then the girl finally comes out. We go, "Hey, been a little bit of a disaster, but they worked on it previously. So let's have them out to work on it." They come out, tech comes out. She's like, "Man, I don't know. Ever since they got acquired by this company, we don't know what's going on." Dude, so, right? Like, you're sending humans out into the field. You've got humans answering the phone. The big corporate conglomerate roll-up person in the Pacific Northeast or Northwest that owns a, B2B service company, or local home services company in Central Florida isn't always a compelling product over time. Right. So I don't know if there'll be consolidation.
Right. Yeah. I think like high level, everyone's always just saying like everything's just going to consolidate. That's kind of like the foolproof answer, but I still feel like there's a lot of nuance to kind of unpack. Eric, I want to finish off with this last tweet. Has nothing to do with business, just about life. And I think it's like the best tweet that I've read. If from you, if I could just read it real quick to finish this off.
Let's hear it.
It says here, "If life expectancy is 78 years, I woke up this morning basically at the halfway point of life, more or less. It's kind of a weird feeling. I don't have any grand lessons from it. Wish I did. If anything, the biggest realization as I got older is how little I actually do know. What I don't understand massively outweighs what I do. Life was different than what I thought it would be, harder in certain ways, but also better in ways I never expected. Fortunately, I feel good about the first half of my life. I had a pretty solid childhood in lower middle class, working class family, single mom, suburbs, sports, no major trauma, things were fine. I graduated high school with a 2.5 GPA, went to community college before transferring to a solid public state school where I found an identity, then the University of Florida, and then somehow Duke Law. I started my legal career at a top 50 firm, then a top 10 firm, then arguably the number one law firm in the country, and I eventually built my own firm. That path sounds intentional in hindsight, but at the time it really wasn't. I had a huge chip on my shoulder, a lot of fear and deep imposter syndrome. I easily could have looked at the 2.5 high school GPA and said I don't belong at Duke, Kirkland, or anywhere near those rooms I ended up in. Maybe I didn't. To be honest, I don't really care to know the answer. Instead, I just held my nose, hoped nobody would figure it out, and kept going. Along the way, I worked for some great companies and learned how business should work, Disney, Rocket Mortgage, among others. The very best at customer client experience. Those were great experiences. Moved all over the place, Michigan, Florida, North Carolina, Texas, Colorado, moved 11 times in 10 years just trying to figure things out. And just to paraphrase here, in your own life, Eric, I guess here on out, like what's something that you live by that maybe you could pass down to me right now, whether it's life and business overall?
Yeah, well, thank you for reading that to me. You write these tweets and I mean, it's like, you're gonna make me cry listening to that back. But I shared this post again this morning and it sort of sums all that up, right? And I tweeted it out a few weeks ago and I thought it was really good. I was actually on a run and sort of stopped and pounded out this post and fired it off about a month ago. And I thought it sort of nailed all of that, right? All of what you just described in one thing. So I'll just read it. It's a perfect mantra for life. And it's what I would have, if I could go back and say, 20-year-old Eric, like, here's the one thing that I would tell you. It's, you have to wake up every day with unshakable confidence that everything's going to work out. It's probably going to work out in different and better ways than you can ever imagine. But in order to get the most of it, you have to get up and you have to get the fuck after it. That's it, man.
I love that.
It's a long, winding journey through life. Things that you think are going to happen don't. Things that you really don't want to have happen do and turn out to be great things. Probably my and I always get a little nervous saying this out loud, but two of my three biggest fears in life happened in the last 5 years. Two of my three biggest fears. And the reason I'm nervous to say, because I'm like, fuck, number three is going to happen. I'm like, it's coming. But they each turned out to be, in some weird way, like beautiful, incredible things that I'm glad now happened. And if you'd told me that at 20, it'd be very hard for me to appreciate that. Right. And even as I sit here right now and I say all this to you, like, it's still hard for me to believe it, because I still have generalized day-to-day anxiety around life and success and business and building and how are we doing and looking at this and looking at that. But you gotta believe deeply everything's going to work out, because it will. But if you're going to get the most of it, man, it's not just going to happen. You have to get the fuck after it.
Dude, I really appreciate that, man. Like, thank you so much for that. That was super dope, man. Where can people find you, Eric? Go ahead and plug yourself in, plug your company in. Feel free to go ham.
Yeah, we're SMB Law Group, small medium business law group. I'm SMB attorney on X. That's SMB_attorney. I'm also on LinkedIn, Eric Pacifici, and then lightly across Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, although I suck at those platforms. So it's not really a lot going on there. So right. If there's ever anything I can do to help anybody who's listening, legal, otherwise, business, life, always happy to chat. Reach out anytime.
I appreciate that, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys. Cheers.